There are a ton of weird, twisted characters in anime, and Jujutsu Kaisen is by no means an exception to this rule. You've got Mahito, who spends his entire life trying to make Yuji's life a living hell. You have Mei, who... well, I don't really need to get into that. But at the forefront of this, you have a little being known as Kenjaku, who spent its entire existence of over 1,000 years trying to satisfy his curiosity through the most evil and sick, twisted experiments of all time. Let's start at the beginning of its story, just so we can know exactly why it did what it did. At the point of the reveal that Pseudo Geto was actually Kenjaku, the world shook a little bit. Through the means of Master Tengen, we learned that Kenjaku was an ancient curse user whose curse technique allowed it to transfer its consciousness into its brain, and then it could transfer its brain into the bodies of other people. Of all the bodies that Kenjaku took over that we know of, the most important are the most evil sorcerer in history, Noritoshi Kamo, Yuji's mother, Kaori Itadori, and of course, Geto. Besides the use of these very important bodies, we also know that he was taking over random sorcerers' bodies and putting plans into motion that would make just huge waves in the world if they ever came to fruition. And they did. First, he helped Sukuna split his soul into 20 cursed objects using his fingers. See, at the time, Sukuna was just a curse user, the strongest and most evil curse user of all time, but a curse user nonetheless. He obviously wanted to live on after his inevitable death, so Kenjaku, being a master of reincarnation techniques, helped him achieve this. He did this in anticipation for his own plans, which we'll talk about later on. Like we said earlier, Sukuna is not the only one of these sorcerers that Kenjaku made contracts like this with. He made deals so they could preserve their lives as cursed objects and eventually come back to what is known as the culling game. Some of these reincarnated sorcerers include Kashimo Hajime, who only agreed to come back so that he could fight Sukuna, Angel, who decided to come back so that she could stop the other reincarnated sorcerers from destroying the world, Reggie Star, Takako Uro, Ryu Ishigori, Dhruv Lakdwala, and Yorozu, who took over Megami's sister's body and was like obsessed with Sukuna. There were a lot of others as well, but you get the point. Kenjaku jumped through a lot of hoops to get the culling game started. So now you're probably wondering,
why in the world did this thing spend so much time prepping for the culling game?
Well, to fully understand the motivation behind Kenjaku's actions, you have to jump back to when he was in Noritoshi Kamo's body. During this period in history, he completed some of the most evil and sickening experiments of all time, to the point where Noritoshi Kamo, who he was inhabiting, became known as the most evil sorcerer in history. Of course, at the forefront of these experiments was the creation of the Cursed Womb death paintings. This story starts with a woman with a strange genetic mutation who birthed a part cursed spirit, part human baby. She was seen as cursed and cast out by her society, so she fled to a temple that was run by sorcerers. Turns out, it was run by Kenjaku. He held her prisoner and forced her to have 9 pregnancies and abortions. These aborted babies were stored and put away as cursed objects known as the Cursed Womb death paintings. We only get to see 3 of the 9 incarnated as human-like entities, that being Kechizu, Eso, and Choso. Kechizu and Eso both use rotten blood techniques, while Choso himself uses blood manipulation. Just think about that for a second. Blood manipulation is an innate technique of the Kamo clan, so the Kenjaku-possessed body of Noritoshi Kamo almost certainly had this. This means that on top of everything else that Kenjaku has done, he forced himself on this poor woman 9 times to have these pregnancies and abortions. This man, this thing, is a monster. Now, if you've seen season 2, you know that Choso has a completely fabricated flashback of Yuji being one of his brothers, along with Kechisu and Eso. From the first season, we know that Choso has a kind of sixth sense about his brothers and their impending death, and this manifests whenever he himself was about to kill Yuji. Choso then completely changes his tune and starts referring to Yuji as his brother, and even though it kind of seems like a fake, made-up relationship like Toto, it's real. To confirm this, we see that Choso asks Yuji if his parent had a scar on their forehead, and then we see a flashback of Yuji's parents. Yuji's mom, Kaori Itadori, has the Kenjaku scar, which confirms that Yuji's mom was Kenjaku. He is a half-brother to all of the death paintings. More on that later, but now I gotta get back to where I started this story. Where did I start this story? Oh, right. Why did Kenjaku begin the culling game? The creation of the Cursed Womb death paintings confirmed to Kenjaku that anything that he completely created himself could not exceed his own potential. He reiterates this later whenever he fights Choso, his own son. He deeply desires to make humans fully harness cursed energy, so he's gonna do whatever it takes to make them achieve this goal, which will satisfy his own curiosity. The culling game is nothing more than a means to this end. Because Kenjaku lacks the cursed energy to fully harness Mahito's idol transfiguration technique, which he absorbed from him, to turn all humans into sorcerers, which would effectively allow them to fully harness the power of cursed energy, he decides to merge all of humanity with Master Tengen himself. This just sounds ridiculous and not achievable at all, but I'll try to explain it a little bit. Once upon a time, Kenny and Tengen were actually friends. When you think about it, It makes sense. They alone were basically immortal beings together for over 1,000 years. It's gotta get lonely. Kenjaku knows all about Tengen's powers and vice versa. Once Tengen evolved after the death of the star plasma vessel Riko Amanai, his barrier techniques became all that separated his monstrous existence from the rest of humanity. His evolved existence is essentially that of a cursed spirit. This makes him a target for Suguru Geto's curse manipulation technique, which explains why Kenjaku went for Geto's body. This evolution of Tengen is almost impossible for me to explain because I don't fully understand it, but I do know that Kenjaku tried to force it several times over history. He did this by killing off star plasma vessels that would quell this evolution. He also failed this many times due to the intervention of users of the Six Eyes like Gojo. Upon Riko's death, Tengen actually evolved, Suguru Geto's body got taken over by Kenjaku, and Gojo was sealed into the prison realm not long after. All of Kenjaku's plans were coming together perfectly. He began the culling game, but that itself was somewhat of a facade. Kenjaku used this as kind of a distraction to lure all the good guys like Gojo's side together so that they would fight Sukuna, where he could sneak around and go to Tengen himself. He broke into Jujutsu headquarters to do this, and then he started talking to Choso, his son. He explained what might happen if all this went through. He states that merging Tengen with the non-sorcerers in Japan would mean that 100 million people would become cursed spirits with cursed energy. This would probably cause a distillation process like an Uzumaki, like if you see Geto's cursed manipulation technique come together to an Uzumaki. He claims to feel like a toddler with a blank canvas, with a blank sheet of paper, and he's doing all of this because it sounds fun. 1,000 years worth of manipulation, murder, and incomprehensible acts of villainy for a little fun. After a long fight with Choso and the other guard, Yuki Tsukumo, he reaches Tengen and consumes him like any other curse using Geto's curse manipulation technique. Looks pretty bad, doesn't it? Now all the colonies from the culling game will be used for their cursed energy so that Kenjaku can harness this cursed energy to complete the merger. This is very hard to explain. Now it's time to talk about Yuji's parentage just a little bit more. Kenjaku knew that Gojo would probably escape the prison realm due to Tengen possessing the back of the prison realm. As a failsafe, he knew that he would need somebody to beat Gojo. The only person in history capable of this is Sukuna himself. So, to reincarnate Sukuna, a vessel must be prepared, right? That's just how these things work. Well, Kenjaku knew something that we as readers didn't know until like chapter 257. When Sukuna was in the womb, he had a twin that he consumed. This twin's soul has been reincarnating over the thousands of years since Sukuna was alive. Kind of like Ashura and Indra from Naruto. This soul reincarnated into Jin Itadori, who was Yuji's father. Somehow, Kenjaku knew this. Apparently, Kaori Itadori died and Kenjaku took over her body and went back to Jin, like she resurrected or something. The result of this was Yuji, who was very much a worthy vessel for Sukuna's return. This is so sick and twisted that it's not even funny to me. Our main character's entire existence was planned by the main bad guy to be a vessel for the other main bad guy. Talk about bad luck. Well, as Gojo and Sukuna's fight commences, Kenjaku knows that all the good guys will be there to back up Gojo, so he kind of goes and does his own thing. He goes to hunt down and kill all the other reincarnated sorcerers in the culling game so that he can end the game. Then he plans to activate the merger for his final plan. After taking 2 of them down, he runs into Takaba, the comedian sorcerer. In this comedic battle, Kenjaku states that he has not had this much fun in centuries, and it makes the entirety of the culling games worthwhile, just to fight Takaba. This fight is a strangely wholesome moment in this evil Kenjaku dude's life. And I'm sure it's actually hilarious if you understand Japanese comedy, which I do not. I'm sure you don't either, so we're probably in the same boat. At the end, Takaba is happy, and Kenjaku actually enjoyed the time that he spent fighting him. That is, before Yuta appears out of nowhere and beheads him. Kenjaku is now defeated after 1,000 years worth of preparation and being this close to victory. Despite this, his last words are that he hates to leave so much undone, but his will be carried on. We didn't know what this meant for a while, but we know now that it has to do with Sukuna inhabiting Megami's body. Upon Kenny's death, Kogane, who is the game master of the culling game, I know we haven't talked about that yet, but anyway, it states that Megami Fushiguro has the authority to activate the merger of humankind with Tengen. Sukuna states that he's first going to kill Yuji and all the other good guys before killing all the other players of the culling game and then activating the merger of the masses. He seems to want to do this just so that he can fight whatever abomination spawns from the merger. Given the current status of the manga, I firmly believe that this could actually happen. Gege doesn't pull any punches when it comes to killing off characters, so I could honestly see everyone dying, Sukuna doing this, and the manga just ending. Let me know if you think this is going to happen, and if Kenjaku's will be carried on. Since you've learned everything about the chief bad guy, now you got to check out this video about the chief good guy, Gojo, so that you can understand both sides. Watch this video right here, and until the next one, peace.